Bella and I have had such a difficult journey with breastfeeding. We just kept hitting hurdle after hurdle. I was just in so much pain when she'd try and latch. My boobs got super red. Oh man, it did not work. Positioning. It's so important, but you can overthink it. There are multiple positions that you can burp a baby, blockages or mastitis. You can get either or. There are so many types of breast pumps out there. To have a good setup, somewhere that you want to go and actually feed your baby that is comfortable for you, but we had to ask for help first and we had to get resourceful with what we were doing. Those early days, we were really concerned. Where my breastfeeding experience with Bella is now is a mix of what everyone has told us that we have seen that is, professional, and then what we've learned from people who are mums themselves and what they've gone through in their journeys. Hey guys, and how you doing? Welcome back to my channel. Hey, what are you doing? So today we're talking all things breastfeeding. Welcome back to part 2 of my tips on breastfeeding. So guys, in this section of my tips for breastfeeding, I'm going to talk a bit more about the challenges that I faced while breastfeeding, especially in the early days with Bella. So we didn't really know what demand feeding was until we did our antenatal classes, and that is apparently what everyone is doing, but it is the new way in which we mothers are to feed their baby. So it's the new method that they believe is the best for bud getting milk. As a general time frame, babies and newborns need to feed every 2 to 3 hours, but if they are hungry, you feed them. So you feed on demand. So whenever they're ready, you need to be ready to go. No matter if it's day or night or they are cluster feeding, whatever it is. This was the part of motherhood that was actually like, it's really not about you anymore at all. Like, you literally are at someone else's beck and call 24/7 and you can't say no. Your baby has to eat, whether you're breastfeeding, whether you're using formula, whether you've got someone else in the house, it doesn't matter. Your kid's got to eat if they're hungry. And I think that was sort of the defining moment when Bella came for us to know, holy crap, it's not us anymore. We knew it wasn't us anymore, but your baby's lives are in your hands. And it was really challenging in the newborn days because not only are you demand feeding and trying to work out feeding, but you're also extremely sleep deprived, you're recovering from the birth, and it's just a whirlwind. And I think that's when the adrenaline and everything else just kicks in and takes over. And certainly for me it did, because it was not easy. And I mean, initially Bella's feeds, because she couldn't latch properly, she was feeding like 45 minutes each side every time. So she would feed like an hour and a half, and then I'd have to burp her for nearly half an hour. So that's like 2 hours gone. Then she would generally always fall asleep on the boob in the newborn days. I'd put her to bed and then I'd get maybe half an hour myself and then have to get her up again to feed her. It was just... it was so mental. It was just, it was so tough. She's not meant to feed for 45 minutes either side. We didn't really know that. We didn't know how long she was meant to feed for. They just said if she's hungry, feed her. So that's what we did. But because her latch was so poor and we didn't realize how bad it was, we thought that was normal. The more specialists and lactation consultants that we saw, the more they were like, no, that's not right. But we didn't know that. No one said that to us. And every kid's different. So while one baby might be fine feeding 5 minutes either side, another might need 15 minutes either side. Like, how do you know? So it was really hard initially. And now we know she didn't need to be on there for 45 minutes and she probably wasn't actually getting the milk. And the energy she was using to actually try and latch and trying to suck out the milk was probably actually using up even more energy for her. So she was getting more and more hungry, if that makes sense. But yeah, demand feeding. So they will feed every 2 to 3 hours generally, but sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on your baby. But it is a thing, and that is how the medical experts and professionals say that you should feed your baby. Demand feeding. But the good thing to know about demand feeding is that the number of feeds do reduce, and when they do, it's just the best thing. Which brings me to my next point. Cluster feeding is where typically newborns, they will feed for a few hours of the day, typically in the evening and nighttime, where the babies will just feed continuously and just basically need some settling, and they'll be extra hungry, so they will just want to feed and feed and feed. It can last anywhere for a few days to a few weeks, the period of time that they do it over, and it can come and go when they're going through developmental leaps. Bella's happened in the afternoon, so it happened generally from like 2 p.m. till 6 p.m. Sometimes went a bit later. later. So it's generally a few hours in the day. Typically it's later at night. She would feed pretty much every half hour during that time. And it was, I don't want to say the word brutal because like that's not a very nice word to use when you're talking about your baby feeding, but it was a lot. So thankfully it didn't last, obviously, but as a first time mum it was pretty hard to, I don't know, I just kept feeling like I didn't have enough to feed her. I felt like I actually had an undersupply when it would come to times where she was cluster feeding, because by the afternoon anyway your milk supply is typically at its lowest because they've been feeding all day, you've exerted energy as well. That's generally where you as an adult are starting to wane a little bit, but that's when they're starting to get hungry. So your milk supply is at its lowest, but they're also getting a lot of fat and good nutrients from it. So even though it kind of felt like I had no supply, and I didn't realize this at the time, she was actually getting milk. The other thing that cluster feeding does is it's supposed to actually increase your breast milk supply. So the more that they're feeding, the more your supply is starting to get into a bit of a rhythm when they're newborn, so that your milk can sort of build up so that it's got production and supply for down the track. But it's certainly not something that was definitely easy. And I met people later on that said, you know, my baby actually cluster fed from 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. or 9 a.m. till 11. So like, oh my goodness, thank God Bella did not cluster feed in the middle of the night. Like I was actually quite lucky it was in the early evening. That would have been awful. It's not easy, but it's something to definitely be aware of. So let me know in the comments down below what times your baby cluster fed. To meet people that their babies did it at different times, I find really interesting. So I didn't really touch on this too much in part 1, but breast pain was a massive issue. I can't really remember the pain before my breast got engorged, but certainly afterwards, the pain once my milk had come in and getting Bella to latch and everything like that was intense. I tried lots of different things. I tried the heat pack, not just when I had blocked ducts, but just in general, just to try and help. I tried hot showers, I tried baths, and I would have to fill the water up higher than I usually would so that my breasts were actually under the water, just to try and soothe them with some Epsom salts. I tried things like ice bricks. Ice bricks did actually help quite a bit, but it would then get really numb. It was kind of a weird pain sensation afterwards. So ice bricks I found really helpful. I did try the nipple gels and nipple compresses that you can use. I know Rite Aid is a brand that does them. A couple of other brands are out there as well. I didn't find them very effective for me personally, but I know that they are for a lot of people. I think it was more so that they wouldn't stick to my skin to stay in my bra, and they're a circle, but they just wouldn't fit on my nipple. They wouldn't sit there. I think it was just the shape of my boobs as to why they wouldn't work for me. I do think though that if you can use them, they would be really effective. They just kept falling off me though. It just wasn't working. I did use, not so much for pain, but I did also have like nipple pads, bamboo ones, not the cotton ones, because when your boobs are so cracked and red raw and if they're bleeding, it can stick to you. So a friend of mine suggested bamboo ones over cotton ones. I found the bamboo ones quite effective for that. They didn't actually stick to like any scabs or anything like that that were on my boobs. I know you can get reusable ones too. I didn't go down that avenue, but next time I probably will. Thankfully I didn't have to use a nipple shield or nipple balm. Well, I chose not to use nipple balm. I instead just put breast milk on my boobs when they were really bad in terms of like cracking and stuff like that. That I found worked for me. It's a natural way to do it. There are so many balms out there that do work for people. I just wasn't comfortable using them, so I just put breast milk constantly on my boobs before and after she fed, and that seemed to help with the cracked nipples. It's really interesting because quite a few people said in the early stages, while you're getting used to breastfeeding, your breast can be quite tender and the whole experience can be, you know, a little bit painful, but it goes away or you get used to it. We didn't really know how long it would take for the pain to go away, hence why it was still painful at 5 months. But the term tender, if I think of the term tender, I think, oh, there's a little bit of discomfort, but it's not super bad. It was next level. Like, it was not tender. It was hardcore painful. And it's something that I just don't think anyone really prepares you for, that it can be that painful. And it's like frostbite on your boobs and knives on your boobs and razor blades. It is intense. It is so painful and so raw. So like every time even just an item of clothing would graze against my boobs, it was so painful. I mean, for those first few I reckon a few months. Like, I didn't wear a bra. When I was at home, most of the time I just didn't have a shirt on because it hurt to have anything over my boobs. And not just the fact that they were swollen and raw and everything else, but they were just so painful. And I remember after night feeds especially, I would be in so much pain afterwards. Like, for the next 15 to 30 minutes, I wouldn't be able to actually sleep. They would just be throbbing. That's when I'd have to get ice bricks or something and just put it on them just so I could try and sleep because the pain was so intense. It's almost like when you get a migraine headache, like, and it's just, you can't get rid of it. That's what it was like, kind of, but different pain. But that's kind of what it was like. I could not get rid of it. It was so full on. The pain was just nothing like I ever thought it could be or would be or anything like that. It was so intense. And, you know, now there's a whole new challenge with teeth, but that's a completely different pain. But certainly, like, those early days, just while your boobs are adjusting to it, and like everyone's breasts adjust differently in terms of getting used to the baby latching and just having a baby suck off your nipples, it's obviously going to cause some sort of discomfort or rawness for your breasts, but it was just next level pain. Like, I can't even put into words the level of pain that it was. I wanted to have Bella in this a bit more, but she's a little bit restless. She just wants to play. She's not really in the mood to sit still, so she's playing in the other room with Dad. So around 3 to 4 days generally is when your milk will come in. So prior to that, you have colostrum, which is a more thicker sort of gold colored liquid. So around that time, you can have your breasts get engorged. So they can get really big, really uncomfortable, really sore, really swollen. And I definitely got this with Bella. Oh, it was so bad. They got so big, like not double the size, but they were just massive, and the whole shape changed, the nipple changed. They were hard as a rock. Oh, I can't even explain it. And the nipple wasn't easy for Bella to be able to get hold of. Like, it was literally like the whole boob was like this and engorged and swollen and fat. Not fat, but just the milk was blocked up because my breast got engorged. Bella had even more trouble latching. So at this stage, that was about day 3, Matt went out and bought a breast pump, and I tried to use it and it just was crap. After about an hour and 15 minutes, I'd got 20 mils out and it was so deflating. So Bella like couldn't feed properly from it. She had the 20 mils that I was able to express, but then she just couldn't get any more milk out from me. But the Medela Symphony was amazing. I hired it out from a chemist after all this happened. But next baby, I'll be doing it from day dot, so that once I go through my milk coming in, then at least I can express and I have some milk there for Bub, so Bub doesn't get hungry and I don't get in a lot of pain. But oh man, engorgement was just so painful. So many people that we've spoken to actually think that you should still be in the hospital until your milk comes in, which I know is easier said than done, but I kind of think that there's something to that, especially if you're a first-time mum, because we didn't actually know a lot about that in our antenatal and postnatal classes. They didn't really touch on that very much. So guys, breastfeeding in public, man, I was so scared. Is Mummy talking? Good girl. I was so scared to breastfeed in public. I can't even tell you how scared I was. And it was a mix. It was the fact that Bella and I just couldn't get a rhythm going. She couldn't latch properly. I was in a lot of pain. And it was also, I didn't want someone to come up and say something. I know that's so silly. She gets a bit distracted. There wasn't much milk. I know, Mummy's talking. This is a new thing as well. I can't talk or eat or do anything while she's feeding because she just gets distracted. I was kind of petrified, to be honest. I didn't want somebody to come up and, you know, shame me for feeding in public or make me feel awkward and uncomfortable when I already was extremely tense and awkward about feeding Bella anyway. I was so nervous to feed in public because it was just so hard for us already, and that was at home in a comfortable surroundings. But I remember the first time I fed her was in a car park and Matt was with me. It was actually a lot easier than I thought because she needed to feed. I didn't really have a choice. We weren't at home. You know, I can't say no to her. Like, she's got to eat, and she wasn't on solids or anything, so she could only have milk. So, you know, you just have to get over it. But we didn't have a choice. So, like, I had to feed her. I can't not feed her. But a couple of times in the early stages of me feeding her in public, I would use a muslin wrap just to cover myself. So I'd sort of put it over here and she would be feeding under here. I found it so uncomfortable. It was good girl, good bit. It was so uncomfortable. It was hot for Bella. She didn't like it over her face and I couldn't see her. So at that point still, I was also holding my nipple in shape for her to be able to actually latch. So I couldn't see what I was doing to be able to get her to feed. So it was just a pain in the butt. Like, it was actually just more of a nuisance than, you know, a blessing in terms of like hiding me feeding her from people. After I think 2 times of using it, I just thought, nah, screw this. It's just too hard, and I'm not gonna feel bad feeding her in public when she needs to be fed, like, or feel guilty or feel ashamed of it or anything like that. You know, we just got more confident with it, didn't we? We got more confident, and she just woke up. That's why she looks a bit, oh, you're blowing raspberries at everybody. But I mean, I'm feeding her now on camera, so that shows like how much more comfortable I am with it all. No, we're getting the other side. So guys, my next thing that I wanted to talk about is feeling like a failure. I certainly felt like this so much. Not just with breastfeeding, but overall, especially in the early days, but man, with breastfeeding especially, because it was so hard and I felt like I couldn't provide for her. I felt like I couldn't feed Bella, and that was my job. Like, I produced milk to feed her and I couldn't even do it. So man, it took a massive toll, and it was, yeah, it's not easy. And there were so many times and so many days, and majority of the newborn phase, really, I honestly felt like I was failing at it because we couldn't get it. And you know, if you're out there and you're a new mum or you're breastfeeding and you feel that way, just know that I did too. And it's not easy, and it takes a toll. It's mentally challenging, and it's mentally exhausting, and it's physically draining. I read that breastfeeding on average burns around 500 calories a day. I don't calorie count. I actually don't know like how many calories you need in a day, or if that's a lot, but it seems a lot to me. I certainly noticed that, especially in the early days, I was super hungry. I was so much more hungry when I was breastfeeding, and I would have to have snacks around. I would get quite dehydrated really quickly, so I would have to have things around to help with that. I think the one thing to take is that your baby does not think that you're failing. They don't know what that means, and they just want to be around you. They just want you, because that's what they know from being in the womb. I mean, it's okay to feel like you're failing, but I guarantee it's not as bad as what you think. And that is something that I have learnt, and it's taken a long time, and it's only been recently that I've actually gotten to that point. But I look at Bella now and how far we've come, and regardless of whether I was using formula or like I am now still breastfeeding, I know that we've done a good job to get to where we are. And the thoughts that I had way back when, I know why I had them, but they're just non-existent, really, because it's just not the truth. And you know, I was lucky that I had people around me to disagree with me when I would get that point across, and I think that's really important. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for part 3, which will go live next week. Guys, I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you've learned something, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.